In July of 2011, Earth's newest country was born, as South Sudan decided to split from Sudan, following decades of conflict post-independence largely centered around ideological differences between the majority Muslim North and the majority Christian South. South Sudan was immediately admitted into the UN, the African Union, the East African Community, and even FIFA, evading the struggles associated with declaring independence like Kosovo had 3 years prior. However, for what was an extremely common occurrence, particularly in the post-war era, the birth of countries on this planet of ours has become exceptionally rare. Since South Sudan's independence declaration, not a single nation has declared and acquired independence to successfully become Earth's 196th country. This is all about to change though, all thanks to a referendum held on a small island in the eastern Pacific Ocean back in 2019. An island named after the French explorer who first visited it in 1768, the island of Bougainville. But how did we get here? In the 18th century, European colonists were discovering islands all throughout the Pacific, which we can see from how they're named today. The Cook Islands are named after James Cook. New Caledonia got its name as the landscape reminded Cook of Scotland, and even New Zealand is named after the westernmost province of the Netherlands. When Louis-Antoine de Bougainville was given permission by King Louis XV to become the first Frenchman to circumnavigate the globe in 1766, he arrived in Bougainville 2 years later. Though he was 152 years late after the first European explorers had arrived on the island. Nevertheless, upon arrival, he, not egotistically at all, decided to name the island after himself, despite there already being people living there who didn't have much of a say in the decision. The name stuck though, and though it faded into obscurity for a century after this, the new state of Germany, which fell behind their Western European counterparts in the colonialization game after only being born in 1871, decided to annex the island in 1899, though it did so by proclaiming it part of German New Guinea, alongside the northern half of what is today Papua New Guinea. The decision will be the catalyst of why the struggle for independence would be so difficult over the next century. Bougainville is part of the Solomon Archipelago, whose remaining islands conversely became a British colony only 6 years prior to Germany's annexation of the island. Following the natives' conversion to Christianity under German rule, Australia occupied the island, as well as the rest of the German colony of New Guinea, following Germany's defeat in World War I. In 1949, the northern half of New Guinea merged with the southern half following a bill passed in the Australian Parliament, creating the modern Papua New Guinea borders we see today. New Guinea would retain its status as an Australian territory until 1975, at which point Bougainville, naturally part of the Solomon Archipelago, saw itself dragged along for the ride with the rest of Papua New Guinea, all thanks to decisions the natives had no participation in. So what's the problem? The natives don't feel Papuan. It's an identity that was forced upon them. They're literally an island, so it's not like there would be a contentious border to negotiate over. Why wouldn't they just be given to the Solomon Islands, or even independence itself? That will be because of a certain incident in 1967. But let's back up for a second. Going back to where places get their names from. The Solomon Islands were named 200 years before Bougainville and Cook's expeditions, actually by a Spanish explorer named Alvaro de Mendana. He claimed he had found the biblical riches of King Solomon on the archipelago, thanks to the discovery of its gold deposits. Bear in mind, this was the same century that the Spaniards had taken over the entirety of modern-day Latin America for gold, so naming it after a biblical prophet wasn't too far-fetched. Back to 1967. As Bougainville is indeed a part of this archipelago, its wealth is rooted in not only gold, but copper ore, particularly in something called the Panguna mine. The Australian Konzik Rio Tinto Company began production on the mine in 1972, and it quickly became one of the largest open-cut mines on Earth. Despite Papua independence in 1975, this same Australian company retained control of the mine all the way up to 1989, creating large environmental destruction in the process, as well as economically neglecting the impoverished locals who couldn't enjoy the financial benefits of having such a natural resource. The Papuan state also benefited though, with income from the mine generating 12% of the country's GDP and 45% of its export revenue at the time, with the Bougainvillians being rewarded with their homes being destroyed as the mine grew, as well as the pollution of their rivers from the mine's leftover materials. The natives would not accept this forever though, So in 1988, they formed the Bougainville Revolutionary Army and launched a secessionist uprising against the Papua New Guinean government. The effect of war was immediate. The mine closed in 1989 and has been closed ever since. The Papuans imposed a blockade on the island in 1990, with the Bougainvillians unilaterally declaring independence. Thousands of troops were sent to quell the revolt. However, the Bougainvillians knew the land and used the natural landscape to their advantage to overcome the Papuan superior military and manpower. Over 15,000 people died over the course of the 10-year conflict, with human rights abuses being committed by either side, until eventually a peace agreement was signed in 1998, committing to grant the Bougainvillians immediate autonomy within the Papuan nation, as well as a commitment to an eventual independence referendum 2 decades later. In 2019, 120 years after first being annexed by Germany, subsequent occupations by Australia, Papua New Guinea, and even Japan briefly during World War II, as well as being the stage for Oceania's deadliest conflict since the Second World War, the Bougainvillians were finally granted the right to partake in a referendum to decide their sovereignty. But this referendum was held 20 years after the war for a reason. In the interim, the Bougainvillians enjoyed semi-independence within Papua. The reconciliation process between the two sides sought to heal the wounds the war had slashed open. The Papuans had kept the Punguna mine closed, showing their commitment to moving forward, and the referendum resulted in 98% voting in favor of independence. 2 years later in 2021, the Papuan government reached an agreement with Bougainville to grant them their eventual freedom in the year of 2027, a massive 16 years after South Sudan's. After the long, bloody, unjust road Bougainville has taken, self-rule is merely a few years away. Okay, so that's how we got here, but what is the world's newest country actually like? Though we started our story with European contact due to that's when written history begins, humans have actually inhabited the islands for over 29,000 years. They are part of the Melanesian ethnic group, similar to Australian Aborigines, Solomon Islanders, Vanuatuans, New Caledonia, as well as Papua New Guinea itself. They are distinguished from Polynesians, another indigenous Oceanian group, because Melanesians look like this, and Polynesians look like this. Papua New Guinea is the most linguistically diverse country on Earth. With 859 languages shared between 8 million people, that comes out to a language for every 10,000 people in the country. Though it will lose some of that diversity with Bougainville's departure, Bougainville is no different in its linguistic diversity, albeit slightly less impressive with its 300,000 inhabitants sharing 21 indigenous languages. If there was one upside to its occupation though, these 21 linguistic groups converse with each other by using the same lingua franca that unifies Papua New Guinea's 8 million, a Creole-based language called Tok Pisin. This language originated as a result of these islands intermixing whilst under colonial rule, amalgamating their native language's structured syntax with English words. It's the same way that Jamaican Patois or Haitian Creole originated in the Caribbean. The most widely spoken indigenous language is Halia, with 20,000 speakers, but other major languages include Nasawi, Rotakaz, Sawi, and Buin. So if you plan on visiting this new country, mastering Tok Pisin is your best bet. Bougainville will become one of only 2 independent countries where the #1 sport is rugby league, the other naturally being Papua New Guinea. However, it is also loved in Eastern Australia, as well as the Cook Islands, a territory in association with New Zealand. For non-rugby fans, this perhaps isn't the rugby you're accustomed to, as the most popular one is rugby union, loved in New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, the UK, Ireland, France, and Italy. So given the nicheness of the sport, we could see Bougainville in the Rugby League World Cup as soon as 2029. Religiously, the island is almost homogeneously Christian. 70% of its 300,000 people are Roman Catholic, with 25% following Protestant denominations, amongst them Methodist, Presbyterians, Baptist, Anglicans, and Adventist, reflecting the missionary nature of Bougainville's conversion to Christianity. Very few also still follow indigenous beliefs, with practices varying from ancestor worship to magic and the summoning of spirits, though this course varies largely amongst the various ethnic groups. Bougainville, in its autonomous form under Papuan rule, operates as a presidential republic. Ismail Toroma of the Bougainville People's Alliance Party currently serves as the soon-to-be nation's 4th president. He is elected directly by the people and serves alongside the Bougainville House of Representatives, the 41-member unicameral legislature which is elected from different provinces of the island. Elections are held every 5 years using the limited preferential electoral system. Post-independence, it is uncertain if the lucrative Panguna mine will be reopened. Though it's caused so much damage in the past, this time the money will be going towards the Bougainville state, which may change locals' minds on its operation. With the mine closed, the main exports out of the country are cocoa and coconut copra. With a 40% unemployment rate, a 60% poverty rate, undeveloped infrastructure, and poor public services, the nation will seek to attract foreign direct investment and develop its tourism industry to rival neighboring Fiji to overcome the significant economic challenges that it will be faced with following independence. The Pacific Islands Forum, or PIF, a transnational organization that aspires to form a trading bloc within the region, similarly to how the European Union has for Europe, is composed of all independent Pacific Island nations, including the larger nations of Australia and New Zealand. All countries with one exception, the islands of Kiribati. But recent reports seem to indicate that Kiribati may be returning. Though a seemingly insignificant occurrence and largely ignored by global media, Kiribati's close ties with China, including a Chinese-run military ship arriving in the country in July 2023, has raised alarm bells in the West. This follows Kiribati withdrawing recognition of Taiwan in 2019. China is seeking to expand its Pacific influence in what is a strategically important region in global affairs, which can also be displayed in the same month of July 2023, when the Solomon Islands and China sign a cooperation agreement between the two's corresponding police forces, enhancing the bilateral relations between the two. This shows that though Bougainville's independence may only grab a few small headlines here and there in 2027, even the smallest players can tip the balance of power in this increasingly globalized world we live in. Would Bougainville be close to the West as Papua New Guinea has been, or will it seek to forge a unique position with the Pacific as Kiribati has done? Only one thing's for certain. For the first time in what would be 128 years following their conquest, the Bougainvillians will be able to decide for themselves. Thanks for watching.